There's no take two. There's no just a little more purple. Warts and all, you've downloaded the VO Radio Show.
Welcome to the VO Radio Show. Has been a while, but we have some interesting stuff this week, which we'll get into shortly. But I should introduce myself. My name is Andrew Peters, and up in Sydney,
it's Robbo.
The voice for the voices. This is the VO Radio Show.
Now, you've been busy building your studio, which we'll talk about a bit later.
Yeah.
But one of the things that keeps on coming up in the show is the mic and preamp.
Yeah.
As you know, I've been buying lots of microphones. The one you're listening to right now is the Gefell M930, and I'm using it through the LA610, which seems to have gone down pretty well with a few people, but I'll talk about that shortly. Now, I'm just going to change microphones. Stand by. It's the same mic through the Sebetron, which seems to be a bit of a favourite preamp. So you can probably hear the difference in the sound.
Through the miracle of radio.
It is the miracle. Now, this time round, I'm on a different microphone. This is the JZ Vintage 47. It's an interesting microphone, and I'm running this through the Grace. It's a classic 47 flavour, and it's quite nice. Now, the last one, stand by. We're going to jump onto another one. Okay, now this is the last one that I'll thrust upon you. This is another JZ. This is their C12.
Right.
I really like this one. It's got more top end to it. I'm running it through the Sebetron again, so you're getting a lot of tube sound from that preamp. But this one's actually really nice. It's got that cut through, but it gives you a lot of warmth.
Yeah, I was going to say there's a noticeable difference there, definitely.
Yeah. Which one out of interest, did you like?
I can't remember what the combo was, but the second one that you did was my favourite.
Well, that was this microphone through the Sebetron.
There you go. I must qualify that by saying I'm listening through my Apple Buds because my headphones died on me this afternoon.
So it's not indicative of a great critique, but...
No, but if you want to talk about, different listening environments and all that sort of stuff, then, that sort of stood out to me.
Well, it was interesting because I did a session on Source Connect from here last week. I was running the V12, the JZ, and I was going through the Sebetron. But then we kind of got near the end, and then the engineer said to me, have you got one of the Gefell 930 handy? And I said, yeah. He said, can you read the script again? So I did a reread, and that's the one that ended up being used. Yeah.
Right, there you go.
And so I've kind of found that the microphone that I've had for years has now turned out to be the go-to mic.
The go-to, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, you were telling me this afternoon that you'd been playing around with less tube sound on your microphone inputs at the moment. Would that be right?
Yeah, the 610's good because you can dial it up or dial it back, and you still get that warmth. I mean, you can probably hear it now.
Yeah.
Without being too coloured.
Yeah.
But it just gives you that sort of LA 610 kind of feel. And it's a great combination. In fact, just before we jumped on, I got a message from another audio engineer, and I sent him what we just did, basically.
Right, yep.
And he came back, and in his words, he said, the M930 and the LA610 sounded amazing.
There you go.
That's interesting. So I think I've actually finally, after all these years, discovered a really good change, which is good.
The mix. But then, of course, you play that to another engineer and they'll have something else to say too. So it's the never-ending circle, or you're always chasing your tail. But again, I guess, as we always say, our suggestion would be to anyone who has a home studio sending voice out is don't screw with it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, which I tend to
send
do.
It flat. Yeah.
Stupid boy, never learns.
Yeah, well, because I tend not to. I actually tend to record as we suggest people record at home. Is I very rarely do too much to a voice. If the read is a little dynamic, I'll put a touch of compression on.
Yep.
But in this digital age, I rarely find occasion that I feel I need to do any processing as I'm laying down a voice, I'll be honest. People out there are probably scoffing and spitting out their dinner, but that's my way of doing it anyway.
Probably the right way. Well, it's certainly the right way for you anyway.
Yeah, well, it's the right way for me. I guess that's the best way to put it. I find that the best for me because as I say, I mean, it's digital anyway. We're working with reasonable microphones and preamps. I don't see any need to colour it before I start working.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Now, just to mention, finish off with the microphones here. You're not on the SM58 or 57
No,
this
I'm
week.
not. I'm not being lazy this week. No,
Yeah, that's right. What are you using?
I'm using my AKG little spunky number.
It's a really old one, isn't it?
It is. It's the C12A.
So the C12As would be, I'm guessing, 60s.
60s, late 60s, early 70s. Yeah.
Now, is it a tube? Has it got a tube? Is it a tube?
It's got a little tube. It's got it does in the transformer box.
Yep.
I'm not using a preamp. I'm just going straight into the back of Pro Tools.
Okay. Or a pop filter by the sounds.
No, it doesn't have a pop filter. Am I popping all over the place? I'm not hearing it in the buds. Folks, this is a professional setup.
In a world where only the best voice will do. Realtimecasting.com.
But that microphone you've got now, the story with that is incredible.
It's a long story. I worked for a radio station a long time ago. I'm not going to say the name of them now because I'm not going to give it back. But we moved from one premises to another, and during after the move, I walked into the tech's room, and this microphone and its box were sitting on the bench with a whole bunch of others, and I said, that's an awesome collection of mics. What's happening with those? And the tech turns around and goes, they don't work. We're going to throw them out. So I spotted this one and went, do you reckon I could have it then if you're going to throw it out? Yeah, mate, not a problem. So I took it away and took it back to my little production room and plugged it in, and sure enough, it worked. And so it's been a good 20 years this has been in my service. And I did have some issues with it last time I plugged it in a few years back, I'll be honest, because there was like a nasty hum going on. But this time, obviously, when I plugged it in, I haven't had that trouble. So I'm presuming that it was something going on in the electricity circuits that caused that hum, because it's now not an issue at all.
Is it something to do with like ohms or something? Or
I was living in a unit at the time, the last time I plugged this in, and I would imagine that it could just be dirty power.
Yeah.
Someone out there who knows more about that stuff than me will explain it better. But if you plug certain things into electrical circuits, it can cause this thing called dirty power, which audio engineers don't like, which is why studios normally have their own clean power supplies.
It's always like use one power point and run extenders off it, basically.
Yeah, almost. Yeah, but don't start a fire by overloading it.
Hopefully not.
But no, look, as we were talking about, I've just rebuilt the room here, and I did have a Sparky come and put in a couple extra power points for me. So but yeah, there's certainly plenty of stuff you can plug into a PowerPoint in this recording studio, that's for sure.
Now, the other thing, because we're both ex-radio guys, you would have worked primarily with the radio voice. Has that affected the way you actually mic up and record?
Yeah, I guess it has. I mean, radio, you do a lot of compression. As everybody knows, compress the living hell out of it and then compress some more. It's interesting though. I mean, there's a guy who who does a lot of voiceover work around town, a guy called Steve Britton.
Yep.
He will only work on a 416. If you put anything else up in front of him, he'll just walk out pretty much. That's Steve for you.
Yep.
Steve also walks in with his own headphones as well. So he's just that type of guy. Look, to be fair, Steve has a Steve Britton sound that, Look, I guess if I'm working with voice for radio, because I record clean, as I said before, I do compress a lot more. I do like a 416 for broadcast because it's got that sort of high top-end frequency sort of thing going on that sort of makes it a bit brighter automatically. You don't really have to play with that too much to get that cut through.
Yep.
Whereas for television, you can, in inverted commas, dull it down a bit. So then I would go to like a Neumann or something like that, or a more tubey sort of microphone for that nicer, warmer sound. But then, interestingly enough, having said all that, in this day and age of digital television, we still have people sitting at home watching TV with their plastic tinny speakers on their telly going. So, and we have digital radio that's effectively in mono. Well, it is in mono because there's only one speaker, yet it's digital radio. So it's hard to know really what to mix for. And I in my new setup here, I just went out and bought myself a really cheap pair of computer speakers and sat them on the desk under the monitors, and that's now my C monitors. So I have an A and a B, but then I also check my TV and radio mixes now through just through the little computer monitors as well, because it's hard to know what people are listening on anymore.
Yeah, well, that's true.
Yeah.
So
yeah, they just throw it in.
Yeah.
Look, I mean, I don't want to put myself out there as the worldwide expert, because I'm certainly not. I just, I find that I pull a reasonable sound and my clients are happy with that. But I mean, my way of doing it is I actually find a sound on my voice first that I'm happy with. And then what I do is, instead of EQing my voice around the music, I actually, as much as possible, EQ the music around my voice.
Yep.
So I'll find those frequencies in my voice that I want to cut through, and I will actually go into my music bus, because, if I've got 3 or 4 channels of music, I don't want to have to EQ them all. So I EQ the bus, and I just pull out some of that frequency underneath the voice, which helps it to cut through. And it's interesting because I was listening to a podcast just the other day, and they were talking to, I can't remember the name of the network now, but a news network in the States who have a very good reputation for the quality of their sound. And they've just moved this radio station to new premises. And they were talking to the chief technician saying, well, what's the secret sauce in your on-air sound? And he said, well, all we use is U87s, but the secret sauce of using the U87 is we use the low-end roll-off, which I think he said was around 250 hertz. And it's interesting, if you actually have a microphone with a low-end roll-off, or actually if you actually listen to the podcast, he clicks it in and out there, it actually loses a little bit of that muddiness. In fact, a lot of that muddiness, and gives it this really nice cut through. If you listen to it by itself in a Pro Tools session, you would probably be wanting to add some bottom end into the voice, thinking, oh, it's not all there. But when you put some music under it, because I've played with it since listening to that podcast, or when you put it out cold broadcast over the air, and the on-air processing does its thing, it's amazing the difference in the sound. It hasn't got that muddy, lost in the mix quality. It's actually quite bright and out there and punch you in the face sort of sound. So yeah, it's interesting. It's worth playing around with lots of those little knobs and dials that they sort of put on there.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing. We talked about the U87 the other day, and a guy we both know have worked with, he talked about the U87s, and he made the comment that they work much better in a bigger room.
Yeah, well, they've actually made bigger rooms than their last premises, because they wanted to get that separation between the mics. So they actually, if they've got 2 or 3 presenters, they can actually space them out better and get better separation from each microphone. And interestingly, he was saying that that was in the live area, and also in the pre-production area, they've also made similar changes to the voiceover booths. They've actually made them much bigger for that same reason that Tim was talking about. So yeah, there is a even if you listen to a microphone in one environment, it can sound completely different in another. So that's the other interesting thing, isn't it?
Yeah, but it was funny though that Tim Simons actually picked up on that. It was one of his comments, and I kind of thought, that's a bit odd. I don't know what that means particularly. But then when you followed it up with the information you just said about the guy, having bigger rooms and stuff, it was like, oh, okay. Well done, Tim. Well done, my friend.
Yeah, well done, old chap. But Tim's a bit of a legend anyway, so.
He is indeed. He is a legend.
The VO Radio Show is produced in the studios of Voodoo Sound. Radio, TV, sound design. Find it all at voodoo-sound.com.
Talking about voices, though, what are your favourite ones to work with?
Oh, look, I'd be lying if I didn't say I loved working with Steve Britton. The problem with Steve's voice, though, is that people's first inclination is to mess with the bottom end of Steve's voice, and that's actually the one thing that you need to leave alone. For those who don't know, for our overseas guests, Steve is who would you equate him to in the US?
I don't know whether I would. Anybody really. He's just got that sort of. He's the big sort of big promo voice. He could be like a network voice kind of.
Yeah. Actually, here we go. I've got an old piece of his. Let's play this.
The moment Melbourne's been waiting for. Underbelly is finally here.
I wanted to hurt them. I wanted them to bleed.
Does it make me a monster? Underbelly premieres Sunday 8:30, then continues Tuesday on 9.
Yeah, so there you go. Just a quick little grab, but that's Steve.
Yeah.
And interestingly, a lot of people fall over with Steve because the first instinct is to reach for the bottom end, and it's actually the bit of Steve that you want to leave alone. Or if you do anything, more than likely you're going to want to cut. The difficult thing about EQing Steve is as soon as you touch the top end, his S's go all over the place.
Yeah, because he has got that crackle on the top, hasn't he?
Yeah, that's right. So you've really got to work the de-esser and find that nice balance between it working hard but not being able to hear it. Because it will work hard because you're trying to get him to cut through. But other voices, there's this guy, some guy who's not very well known, doesn't do a lot. Some guy called Andrew Peters, down Melbourne way somewhere.
Yes.
Holger Brockman would be another one of my favourites.
Okay, it's interesting.
I like people who understand the craft.
Yeah.
I don't like working with voices who are put on voiceover agents' books for the hell of it because it makes our stable look big.
Yeah.
People who have this demo that you listen to and you go, yeah, okay, that'd be really nice. That'd work on this script. And then you get them in the booth and it's quite obvious that they've spent the last 3 months putting a demo together and it's going to take us about the same amount of time to get this 30-second read out of them. I don't like that.
That's interesting because there are companies, particularly in the US, that specialise in making demos. And we've talked about this before.
We have.
But the one thing that sort of occurred to me was that the end result basically was a showcase for their engineering skills.
Yes,
rather as opposed to the voiceover talent. You know?
Yeah, it's difficult. Look, I came up through the industry at a time where getting into the voiceover industry was, a 2-3 year deal. Even if you were working, to get with a decent agent. For example, there's an agency here in Sydney called RMK. They certainly wouldn't have had too many younger people in inverted commas on their books. Most of their voices were the older Jim Pikes, Kev Goldsbys, people like that, people who'd been doing it for a long time.
Yeah.
And now it seems to be this competition of not about the quality of the voices on our books, but how many we have.
Yeah.
And this sort of need, it feels like they have this need that they have to fill every single niche. Whereas you would use someone like Ella James, or you would use someone like Kev Goldsby, or you would use someone like Alan Steele or someone like that because you knew that they would be able to deliver you the read that you were looking for. And sometimes you didn't even know what you were looking for. You just knew that their voice was right for the spot. You'd stick them in the booth and you'd give them some direction and they'd give you your direction. And then you'd go, give me your slant on it. And sometimes, maybe 4 times out of 10, that would actually be the gold.
Yeah.
Because they've got enough experience under their belt to understand what you're looking for. And it may be things that you haven't thought of that they just go, hang on, I've got a better way for this to go, and bang, here it goes.
Yeah. It's interesting with agents though. I mean, my Kathy Evans, she's always kept the books very tight and it was always set up to be a boutique voiceover agency, which it's continued to be.
Yeah.
And you're pretty well guaranteed whoever comes from that stable is going to do the job,
Yeah. I shouldn't just say that I shouldn't umbrella all voiceover agents in there, but there are certainly those out there who seem to be going that way.
I don't want to sort of drift into agents at the moment, but I'm sitting here in a studio that's been built specifically to do what we do for a living, and you spend the coin to make it work. But it's still really hard to get that into some people's heads. They just are reluctant to do it.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, some of the agents are not pushing them to do it. And in fact, in some cases, they're actually telling them not to do it.
I think that will change over time, though. Technology is moving so fast that people can't really comprehend that, hang on, this can actually work. I think that's part of the issue. I mean, I'm sort of out there offering myself as a imaging house for radio stations and all that sort of stuff, but I also do chase up agency work. And having done this for 12 years, when I was first out there going, hey, how about you send me your overflow work to mix in my house, people would go, as if, why would we do that? Yeah. Whereas now, people are starting to go, yeah, okay, yeah, why not? So I think mental attitudes are changing, but I think it's taking some time. And I think the other thing about having a voiceover in the room is just that eye-to-eye contact. And I know that...
Yeah. Go on, I was going to say, I had an idea, because I was sitting in the studio talking about this exact thing.
Yeah.
So I said, why don't you just put a big screen up where the window is on the booth.
We can look at each other.
And we'll just look at each other, put cameras in, and you can see me in my booth and it looks like I'm in yours.
Look, here's the way I see it. You and I come from a radio background.
Yeah.
And in radio, ISDN, even 25 years ago, we used it every day. Yep. You weren't in the same room as someone you were recording with or you were working with. I mean, I remember a breakfast team that I worked with, and one of the guys had to go to the States for a week. And so he would just go to the local radio station, the radio station I worked for hired a studio in one of the local US radio stations, and he would just go in there every morning with a panel operator, and he'd basically, inverted commas, phone it in. He'd sit in the studio for 3 hours and do a breakfast show. So it's not a foreign idea for you and I, whereas I think for people in agency land where they've had a studio in the agency or they've gone out to the external recording studio and the voiceover talent has always walked in the door, we've always shook hands, we've always shown them the script, had a bit of chat through, and put them in the booth. I think it's just a bit of I don't want to say scary, but it's the word that comes to mind first, so let's just use it. It's a bit of a scary idea.
Yeah.
Whereas for you and I and for ex-radio people, it's every day. It's like, well, there's no difference whether he's in the room here or he's across the other side of the world. It all works. It all sounds as good. He gives you the same read, doesn't give you a different read just because he's across the other side of the world or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know. I have a feeling that may be part of it.
Yeah, definitely there is, and I think it's not just the fear of not having the person there. I think there's also, as far as the studios are concerned, who are then patching into places like this, their fear, I believe, is that using the word home studio has connotations. And I think the connotations are that everything's a bit rinky-dink. It's not quite right, not as good as our stuff.
And I think that's the thing. I mean, I think the interesting part of this would be to think about the fact that people like you and I actually, as well as selling our services as an audio engineer or a voiceover artist, imagine if you did a demo and you took it around to the studios and you said, here's my demo of the work that I've done or my show reel. By the way, all of this was recorded in my home studio.
Yeah.
So you're not only pushing your service, but you're actually pushing where your service was created. And then all of a sudden it's putting an idea in this person's mind of, okay, well, geez, that's pretty good. There's nothing wrong with that. I think that's sort of the tact the industry has to take if you want to sort of go that way. I think we've got to start changing people's perceptions. And let's face it, no one's going to come to your home to have a look at your studio and go, oh, okay, that looks pretty good, I'll hire you. We've actually got to go to them and go, well, hey, look, I can do this. And not only can I do the work, I can make it sound just as good as if you mixed it here or if you had me in here to do the voice work. Yeah. I think that's part of the solution if you want.
It was interesting actually because when I was away in New York just recently, I went into a meeting and one of the guys there, who's a New Yorker, he is married to a girl from Australia, in fact from Victoria. She is from Bairnsdale.
Yeah.
And I said, oh, that's really interesting. I know an audio engineer that works for the Triple M network. He works from his home in Bairnsdale. He couldn't believe it.
Yeah, right.
He's thinking, Bairnsdale? I know Bairnsdale. And I was saying, well, a lot of the Triple M promos get made in a house in Bairnsdale.
Yep. Well, I sit here in Sydney, Australia, doing promos for radio stations in, London, Singapore, Buffalo, New York. I do some work for. So, it's becoming more and more the norm, but there is still a perception out there that, it's a home studio or, whatever. And it's a stigma, I guess, is the word I'm thinking of is, it's a home studio. Yeah, it is a home studio. And let me tell you, it probably pulls a better sound than your room.
Yeah, so, exactly. Exactly.
The amount of, let's face it, I don't know about overseas, but here in Australia, I've walked into some radio stations that have moved premises and had new rooms built. And I tell you what, I'd stack this room at my place up against any of them.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, there's one here in
we won't mention names though.
No, I wasn't going to mention names. There's one here in Sydney and they moved studios. And the main production studio for the station imaging is in the corner of the building, on the outside corner of the building, and all the walls are glass.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, that's great. And they've got these massive JBL speakers hanging from the ceiling.
Yeah.
It's like, well, I don't really understand that.
No.
I guess the perception is it looks good. You know, when we bring clients through, it looks fantastic. It looks smart.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? That's always been the issue is like, well, now it's all about the way it looks because people come in.
Yeah.
In the days before people came in, because when you worked in a radio station, no one came in. You did everything on the spot without any interference.
That's right.
Everything was built properly. I mean, I found some beautiful old photographs of 5KA in Adelaide where the studio mic was a U87 and the production mic was a U47.
Yeah, there you go. They're gone are those days. Yeah, I remember, I mean, this is going back a while now, so I can't say that this is still the case, but I can imagine it's only got worse. We used to record a lot of in-house acoustic sessions, and more, because artists were realising that, you know, they would be asked to do this, they were bringing in more and more gear, and it got to the stage where in 8 out of 10 cases, they would bring a basic drum kit with them. And I went to management and said, Shaw has this kit of microphones that I can buy for, I don't know, let's say $1,500. I have no idea how much it was. $1,500, nothing really for a radio station.
Yeah.
And something that would, you know, improve the sound of these acoustic sessions that we were doing, you know, and make them sound a little more slick and professional if this is what we were going to be doing. And that was my argument. And I was told in no uncertain terms that $1,500 was a waste of money. I had a couple of shotgun microphones and a few SM57s and 58s. And if that didn't do the job, then I would have to find another way around it.
Yeah.
You know, for a department, the production department, which includes the advertisement production. So, you know, we're producing all the direct commercials for the station. How much money as a department are we making you each month?
Yeah.
And you can't even spare $1,500 to improve the quality of the sound of what you want recorded. You know, that's just one example of many that I could cite. But more and more, it's about the bottom line. You know, it's about, okay, well, you know, how much money can we save if we do this and we don't do this and all the rest of it. So It's sad. And I think eventually it will go the other way. But, you know, my observations of the radio industry in particular, as I mentioned before, is this whole digital radio thing of, you know, improved sound and clarity and all that sort of stuff and more stations. Well, firstly, my arguments would be that every digital radio I've ever seen or portable one is plastic, has one speaker, so it's in mono, and this plastic tinny little sound. And when you say more stations, well, the stations are basically just a jukebox.
Yeah.
The other stations, there's no announcers, there's no art, there's no nothing. It's just a few IDs and a bunch of music rolling around. And I don't want to turn this into a radio slamming episode or anything like that, but for me, it just says a lot about, in some ways, how the attitude towards sound is going. And I guess that was where I was coming back to with the conversation we were having about home studios and all that sort of stuff, is more and more in the broadcast world, sound is becoming, even for in radio, is becoming a less and less appreciated skill than it ever was.
Yeah.
And for me, that's sad. I mean, what did George Lucas say? Sound is half the picture. I mean, he gets it. He understands the fact that if you don't have good sound, well, you know, really you're letting down half your vision, your picture.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that attitude's going a little from the mainstream broadcast media, unfortunately, whereas, you know, sound's just that little room down the back where they just, you know, tidy it up and stick some music under it.
Well, on that note, you're talking through a probably, $3,000-$4,000 microphone?
Microphone? Yeah, that's right.
So at least we're keeping our side of the business up.
Well, that's right. And that's all you can do. I believe is just do what you can do, and that was to my point too about getting out there and sort of spreading the word about what home studios can do. To these agencies and all that sort of stuff, is sort of going, well, you know, we can do it. You know, the perception is that we can't, but we can.
Yeah.
We've all spent money. Those of us who are serious about it, we've all spent serious money making sure that it works properly, because we are professionals and we want to be seen as such. So we're not going to send you a half-assed product because, you know, it's not doing us any service.
Probably the last statement of this episode should be, if you were a plumber or a carpenter, you wouldn't turn up with a $2 hammer.
No, that's right.
Or a
exactly.
set of, $5 screwdriver set, you know.
That's right. I totally agree. And I hope that there's enough sort of, you know, I don't want to say young people out there because that makes me sound old, but I hope there's enough people coming through or coming into the industry that have the same passion as us, that want to get out there and do the same and sell the same message.
Yeah. And also remember, we're selling a story, and the story has to be told properly.
I've been passionate about sound since the first time I saw Star Wars. I remember sitting in the theatre watching Star Wars and just being blown away by this cacophony of sound that was thrown at me throughout the movie back in the 70s. And ever since then, that's all I've ever wanted to do. And I'm sure there are other people out there who feel the same way. So let's hope that together we can put it back on track, so to speak.
I think we all had moments like that. My dad was in electronics. And so I grew up with, reel-to-reel tape and, high-end sort of stereos that he used to build. And then I had a job in a school vacation with a mate, and we went out and we had to go and paint Rod Stewart's office. That was in about 1970, I don't know, maybe 73, 72, 73.
Was Rod around at the time?
He was, and I've still got it. He gave me such a tight ass. He gave us both a copy of You Wear It Well, his new single, and I grabbed the promo version, which I've still got. But as we left, there were like all the tapes, because it was a studio. But there were all this tape that was just, and I said to the guy, what are you doing with the tape? He goes, it's all throwaway. So I grabbed as much as I could, took it home to my dad and said, I've got all these 7-inch reel-to-reels for you. He's like, oh, lovely.
Oh, nice. There you go.
And we probably end up recording over some really good offtakes of...
I was going to say, imagine playing those back.
Yeah, bummer. Anyway, there you go.
There you go. Well, I reckon that's pretty close to a show.
I reckon you're probably about right there.
The voice for the voices. This is the VO Radio Show.
All right, on that note, have yourself a good week, and we'll try and organise to get back together in a week or so.
Sounds good.
But we are pretty slack, so don't hold your breath.
A week means a month.
Yeah, exactly. Oops.
The VO Radio Show is produced in the studios of Voodoo Sound. To polish your next audio production, check us out at voodoo-sound.com. Find professional voices simply all in one place. Realtimecasting.com, including me.